And we're live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight on the Brushfire Mind, we're going to be talking about the Kavanaugh confirmation and the recent academic hoax, as well as the amazing implosion of the radical left. Good God, it's been a beautiful week, and I just can't stop smiling about it. So, Kavanaugh. If I never hear the words credibly accused again, it will be too soon. Now, let me be absolutely clear on this. The confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh is a huge win for conservatism, for the Republican Party, for the Trump administration, and for the rule of law. That said, I am not a huge fan of Kavanaugh. And here's why. I've talked about this on the show a little bit before, but the problem I have with Kavanaugh is that from the very beginning of his nomination, he has been just a fountain of apologetics, essentially. As soon as his whole confirmation speech, he basically spent an hour virtue signaling about his work with women and minorities. Now, I am not opposed to working with women and minorities. I don't have a problem with working with women and minorities. That's not the point. What I have a problem with is all virtue signaling. Okay? The reason it bothers me with somebody like Kavanaugh is because he essentially made it his entire, like that was his CV. He didn't get up there and talk about his accomplishments. He talked about the women and minority stuff. He talked about essentially what should be viewed as his progressive creds. That's obnoxious. But it does appear that he will be a legitimate, on the face of it, it does appear that he will be a legitimate constitutionalist. Now, I say constitutionalist, and there's an important distinction between the idea of a constitutionalist on the court and a conservative on the court. So let me just lay that out for you. Hang on, I got a couple of comments. Let me take a look, see. Okay, yeah, the sound is probably not as good tonight, Julie. I'm usually using a different camera setup for this, but we'll muddle through that. I may just have to buy another microphone. Okay, constitutionalist versus a conservative on the court. It seems like it should be the same thing, and the fact of the matter is, it should be the same thing. But what I'm interested in having on the court, on the Supreme Court, without getting too heavily in the weeds on why we should be seeking the reversal of Marbury versus Madison and the obliteration of judicial review. What the court is supposed to do is interpret the law. And part of that interpretation is to interpret the law within the confines of the restrictive declarations of our Constitution. The Constitution is intentionally limiting. Barack Obama was famous for saying that he hated the Constitution because it put such hard limits on the government. And those of us who have material between our ears were just beside ourselves. Like, didn't you study constitutional law? Do you not understand? That's the point. The reason we have a constitution is so that the government is not allowed to kill us and steal from us writ large on a whim. But no, fuck it. Let's just go ahead and swing a bunch of guns around and steal money from people. That sounds like a great way to run a country. What do you think? No? Okay. So
are you about to endorse a taxation as theft stance right there, Chris?
I always have. I always have. In fact, let me say this in no uncertain terms. If there's ever been any doubt on my particular position to taxation, the truth of civilization and the idea of liberty is as simple as this. No man is free who must pay taxes on his property. If you cannot purchase land, if you cannot lay title claim to land, defend the ownership of that land, improve upon it as you would like, and stay precisely on that piece of land self-sufficiently, producing your own food, gathering your own water, etc., and divorce yourself entirely from engagement with the civilization around you, then you are not truly free. If you do not have the freedom to choose not to engage, then you have no freedom at all. Taxation is that simple. So long as non-voluntary taxation exists, there is no freedom, which is why a government should be funded exclusively on sales taxes and tariffs, because those are voluntary engagements.
Then I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail you there. It just we hadn't made that argument in a while. Go ahead.
Every now and then. And by the way, the tariffs are working freaking brilliantly. The tariffs have been absolute masterstrokes.
As long as they stay temporary.
I'm monologuing. Come on in, Steve.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of tariffs. I don't like trade wars. That's not a free market thing. But if you're going to have to work out free trade agreements, using a tariff to leverage a position, as long as it's a temporary, short-term kind of thing, I get it. And it has worked up to a point so far.
The fact is that the tariffs have been in place against U.S. trade goods in every country on the planet for decades. This idea that Donald Trump was going to start a trade war is as intelligible as the idea that he was going to start a war with North Korea. You cannot start a war. It is not possible to start a war with someone with whom you are already engaged in a war.
True that.
So there was already a trade war ongoing. It existed, and we were losing it. I was explaining this to somebody yesterday. The Donald is not entirely correct on the way that he describes the way we were losing the trade war. The language he uses makes me suspect that he instinctively and gutturally understands the problem, but he doesn't correctly understand how to articulate what he understands. He's like a subject matter expert that doesn't have the skill of teaching.
Now, I think that's fair. I don't think he's had to make the argument in such a way to make such a broad audience understand it, so he doesn't have a practiced breakdown of what it is he's trying to do. I could see that, but by now he should kind of have that sorted out.
Rod comments, don't forget to fight back when they go to cut your throat. Yes, shoot back. Like I said, Constitution, that's important. Second Amendment, come and get me.
And the important thing with a constitutionalist, the thing is, it doesn't really matter if it's the right boot or the left boot when it's on your throat. So the only thing that concerns me with Kavanaugh in the long term is what has been his historical approach to the Fourth Amendment. We've had our differences on the Fourth Amendment, but I'm a firm, as you put it, absolutist when it comes to the Fourth Amendment, and he supports stop and frisk programs and things like that, which I don't agree with at all. Right. However, how that fits into a panel review of any other constitutional laws remains to be seen. I mean, he just got the job.
Yes. And for the lefties that are pitching a temper tantrum about Roe v. Wade, let me put this into perspective. It is not as if Kavanaugh gets to come in and say, hey, guys, I want to overturn Roe v. Wade today.
True.
Okay. For starters, he has already made the statement that it is the law of the land, and that is the fact of the matter. Which is also one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan. So, another moment of just clarity, just so I want a person to understand when I make statements about things like this, what my position is and what the fact of the matter is. So, on the one hand, I am personally pro-life. It is my opinion that we should kill evil men who cause harm to children, and we should not kill children. I think that's a reasonable position. It is my opinion that killing children is a morally bad action, and that not killing children is a morally good activity. Raising children is morally good.
Well, and the flip side of that being, and it comes down to the argument point, as far as a sweeping generality, that's fine. And I do agree with you. The main thing is what happens in an early term pregnancy at a minimum. At what point is it considered a child? That's been open to opinion even among scientists at this point. And it's like I said, if you want to terminate an early term pregnancy, it's your life, it's your body. You do what you want to, but it's not my job to pay for your decisions. Period.
Okay, and I absolutely agree with you that I should not be required to pay for you to murder your children. I do, and I am far from a Catholic, but I do hold with the idea that life begins at conception. And the reason I do is because your option is to choose a particular point among a spectrum that exists between one absolute sea change event where you go from there being two separate entities, an egg and a sperm, to there being a single entity, which is the beginning of a human fetus. So unless you go with life begins at conception, then you're saying that somewhere along the line you can choose what the difference is between what is a human and what is not a human. On the only other position, the end of that spectrum, is the argument that the birth canal magically conveys human rights. So, there's not an intellectually honest argument to be made for early term abortions that is not an equally legitimate argument to be made for late term abortions. And by late term I mean partial birth abortions. If we cannot agree that life begins at conception, but murder can be done to a person once they've passed through the birth canal, then there's no hard standard by which to judge it.
Oh, now, this wasn't what tonight's show was supposed to be about.
No, it wasn't, and we need to get off this tangent in just a second. But let me get back to it. Let me bring this back around to the Kavanaugh situation. So I think I've been adequately clear on what my position is on abortion generally. Now let's talk about my position on Roe v. Wade, and the only constitutionally and legally correct position that a justice on the Supreme Court should be able to hold. In fact, it is the only intellectually honest and constitutionally correct position that a justice on the court can hold. And that is that Roe v. Wade is unconstitutionally bad law. Roe v. Wade, through working with the presupposition that under the Fourth Amendment, your protection of privacy, the right to be secure in your person, properties, and papers, somehow through the 10th Amendment, which says that all powers not explicitly conveyed to the state are reserved to the individual. I'm paraphrasing a little bit there, but somewhere between those two, in what is literally referred to as the nebulous penumbra of unenumerated human rights, there is an assumed right of privacy which allows people to murder so long as they're not observed in that conduct. That is literally the language of the law or of the court decision within Roe v. Wade deciding to allow for abortion under law, and to cause, through federal mandate and legislation from the bench, the states individually whose right to the preservation of their own citizens' interests is supposed to be protected by the 10th Amendment, whose preservation of rights to the individual was used as the excuse in that nebulous penumbra to create a law from the bench without the involvement of the legislation. The only correct position, the only legitimate and intellectually honest position that any justice on the Supreme Court can take on Roe v. Wade is that it is an unconstitutional fact, because it is not the law that causes abortion to be legal in this country. It is a bad judicial decision. That is very different than an act created by legislation. So no matter what your position is on whether or not you should be allowed to murder your babies, the fact of the matter is Roe v. Wade from day one is bad law. Just like the Obergefell case that made gay marriage legal in the entire nation. Whether you support gay marriage or not, the fact of the matter is that under the Constitution, the legislature is supposed to create law. And the fact that law was done through the judiciary means that the results of that law are vulnerable to judicial review and legislation in the future. They're not law. They are not properly and correctly law. However, in order for the court to engage through Marbury v. Madison judicial review in an attempt to overturn Roe v. Wade, a case must be brought which challenges Roe v. Wade in some way. Kavanaugh can't just say, hey, I want to get some Roe v. Wade overturned on this docket. That's not how this stuff works. A case must be brought, and the people who bring that case must prove that they have standing to push the case. Roe v. Wade is unfortunately quite safe for some time right now. So the whole moral panic thing, it didn't even have to do with the left's legitimate concern about any individual law. They talked about Roe v. Wade, and they perpetrated the whole sham where they compared an America where Kavanaugh's on the court to the whole Handmaid's Tale. Like, oh yeah, women will all be property and they'll just be breeding machines. Blah, blah. What?
Yeah, did we cover this in a whole series we did on logical fallacies?
Yes. For almost a full year,
Actually-
we discussed a neological fallacy every single week. It was brilliant.
I'm okay with women being property again.
So to be clear, when Mario
they'd be
speaks,
happier.
it may or may not be satire, and I prefer not to know. I find him more amusing that way.
Agreed.
So,
Sokal.
are we good on Kavanaugh?
Yeah, I'm just jumping in here, so let's move on. I was just going to say, yeah, Roe v. Wade is obviously a 10th Amendment issue. You know, clearly you've covered that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is the thing that I've been wanting to talk about all week. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. So, what happened was, and I pulled up the article and then I switched to another one and pull it back up again real quick.
So we're going to talk about fake research papers in the humanities, I presume.
Yes. Guys, this right here is some of the most wonderfully brilliant work I've seen in a good little piece. I'm going to show you this picture just because I want y'all to see these guys. These guys, let's be clear, these guys are left-leaning academics. These three professors here are in fact left-leaning academics. That's important to keep in the back of your head as we move forward with the rest of this conversation. Academic grievance studies and the corruption of scholarship. Y'all are still getting my audio good, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is just genius. This is so awesome. So take a look at these faces. I've pulled the article through so I can throw some highlights in there. Something is going wrong in the university, especially in certain fields within the humanities. Scholarship based less upon finding truth and more upon attending to social grievances has become firmly established, if not fully dominant within these fields, and their scholars increasingly bully students, administrators, and other departments into adhering to their worldview. This worldview is not scientific and it is not rigorous. For many, this problem has been growing increasingly obvious, but strong evidence has been lacking. For this reason, the three of us just spent a year working inside the scholarship we see as an intrinsic part of this problem.
A pretty strong opening indictment right there.
Yeah. So, obviously, I've highlighted a few things here. We spent that time writing academic papers and publishing them in respected peer-reviewed journals associated with fields of scholarship loosely known as cultural studies or identity studies, for example, gender studies, or critical theory, because it is rooted in that postmodern brand of theory which arose in the late 60s. As a result of this work, we have come to call these fields grievance studies in shorthand because of their common goal of problematizing aspects of culture in minute detail in order to attempt diagnoses of power imbalances and oppression rooted in identity. So, to be very clear, what they're talking about is
AKA white people.
An entire academic catalog, which is called the humanities, which is absolutely dedicated exclusively to the hatred and destruction of white men based exclusively on their identities. These studies groups, they throw around words like sexism and racism all the time. And they are literally an active work in the practical application of sexism and racism. But they've convinced the world that it's okay to be a sexist and a racist if it's white or male. If you hate men or white people, that's okay.
They've taken the Hegelian dialectic to its insane conclusion, right? Where basically they're allowed to be sexist, racist, whatever they want to be, any of their isms that they rail against, so long as they're fighting against what they consider to be the normative power structure, which is the white man in this country. So basically, they're exempt from all of their cardinal sins, so long as they're attacking a white man in this Hegelian dialectic, which basically means that there are the oppressed and there is the oppressor. Okay, it doesn't matter if you work your ass off outdoors making $14 an hour for 50 hours a week. You're an oppressor. Like I'm an oppressive white male, right?
I can tell by your fashy haircut.
It's naked. It's naked racism. It's naked bigotry, and it's. I honestly, I wish we could go back to like the mid '90s when we could get one of those, when nothing was really happening, when things were boring, and like the local news cycle would open up with, "Hey, look at this cute ferret run through a slip and slide." You know what I mean? Like, so that stories like this would actually get some attention, right? This was obviously completely buried by the Kavanaugh circus, but this is really indicative of where modern academia or what we become in modern academia, and it's pathetic. Like we were brainstorming before the show about just some, random theses that we could come up with that probably would have got peer reviewed, right? And it's just absolutely absurd. Come up with anything using any of the neologisms that the modern left has created. And, that's one thing I'll give them credit for. They're really good at making new words. They're insane words, but they're new words. But
like heteronormativity?
Heteronormativity. I came up with one today, which is really good. So there's the pussy hats, right? The women wearing the pink knit caps, right? I came up with the adjective for them, which is cephalogenic. Perfect.
That's fucking brilliant, dude. Sorry for the on y'all, but I'm sorry. I had to give props there.
As usual, I'm bloviating, so just go ahead and move on, serving up that hot red meat, Larry. We love it. Go ahead.
Okay, and guys, of course, there's a link in the description. I put a link in the description to this article and to the Wikipedia article on the Sokal affair. So let me back us up.
The link in the chat as well.
And let me back us up to the Sokal affair real quick. So Sokal is 1996. Here, I'll put it up on this. I'll put the wiki article up on the screen for a minute. The Sokal was an incident in '96.
Yeah.
Alan Sokal printed an article or published an article entitled "Transgressing the Boundaries Towards a Transformative Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity."
Outstanding.
It explained absolutely nothing.
And actually,
pretty sure that's the point.
Yeah.
And actually forwarded this argument that the concept of an external world whose properties are independent of any individual human being was dogma imposed by the long post-Enlightenment hegemony over the Western intellectual outlook.
Deep.
The so-called scientific method. It's becoming increasingly apparent that physical reality is fundamentally a social and linguistic construct. Okay. He's making the argument that the physical world of things you can interact with, which includes the nutritional requirements of your physical continued living is a social construct, that it only exists if you believe it exists.
He's saying that gravity and mitochondria are white men, but you can be stronger if you want to be.
Now, the fact of the matter is that this article was published at all, that this article was published is the absolute end of any intellectual honesty that can be claimed by the movement of postmodernism. The rejoinder from the postmodernists has been, well, it wasn't a peer-reviewed journal. Okay, that is actually a reasonable argument given the context of this argument. Yes, the fact that this particular journal was not at the time peer-reviewed, fine. That's a fair argument to make. But guess what? All seven of the academic journals which published these articles were peer-reviewed journals.
Right.
Let's get down to that a little bit. Because open, good faith conversation around topics of identity, such as gender, race, and sexuality, and the scholarship that works with them, is nearly impossible. Our aim has been to reboot these conversations. Okay, so they list out their methodology down here. Oh, here we go. Our paper writing methodology always followed a specific pattern. It started with an idea that spoke to our epistemological or ethical concerns with the field, and then sought to bend the existing scholarship to support it. Blah, 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 blah. We then made the existing peer-reviewed literature do our bidding in the attempt to get published in the academic canon. So basically they sat down and they said, what's the craziest shit we can shove into these journals? You know, crazy stuff like, let's talk about the rape culture of canines in dog parks.
It says right there, it's sophistry.
Yep. Yeah, I highlighted that. Very important. What we
the
did,
the science
just
of
described is
feeling.
not knowledge. It is sophistry. Yeah. So,
Progressive stack.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
It's exactly like the stack resolution in Magic the Gathering, honestly.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to explain that to the audience in just a second. But first, what if we write a paper saying we should train men like we do dogs to prevent rape culture? Hence came the dog park paper. What if we write a paper claiming that when a guy privately masturbates while thinking about a woman without her consent, in fact, without her ever finding out about it, that he's committing sexual violence against her?
Wow.
I actually saw that article about the. I actually saw some of my liberal friends sharing that article about psychic rape.
That's actually that's like a super hardcore Christian take on sexuality, because Jesus said that if you basically if you jerk off thinking about another woman, you're cheating on your wife. Like, I didn't know, dude. They're the theocrats. The left is the theocracy. It's a religion, Lowry. You have to believe them, or you're a fucking heretic. You know that?
Yes, you must believe. Forget your evidence. You must believe. Mario, we need to do a whole nother panel show where we argue about the existence of God.
I never really got into it because I've always had faith, and I'm just honestly, I'd only delve into just the very basic of Pascal's wager, just things like that. I never cared about it.
Wager is weak sauce. You need to go to Aquinas's Christianization of Aristotle's argument for a first mover.
Aristotle's argument for what?
For a first mover. That shit is unassailable.
The thing is, like, it was always understood to me. It was always so basic. I didn't dive into it. I know I should have. Like, I read basic C.S. Lewis on like Mere Christianity and
yeah. And anyway,
screw tape letters. But yeah,
it's a conversation.
I'd have to bone up on it.
But that's a whole other conversation. Just you spun me off a little bit on it when you brought up the dogmatism of this theosophy.
But if you want to talk C.S. Lewis real quick, just real quick on C.S. Lewis, if anyone gets the reference, all those people outside of the Supreme Court screaming, wailing, and gnashing their teeth, they're the hollow people. They're exactly what C.S. Lewis was talking about.
The hollow people?
The hollow people.
I haven't read the Screw Tape Letters.
It wasn't from Screw Tape Letter. It was... never mind. Move on. Don't worry about it.
Back to it some other time.
Reference fell flat. That's fine.
Yeah. So, oh man.
Next, a 7-part series on the Chronicles of Narnia. Why not? Hey.
A gender scholar goes to Hooters to try to figure out why it exists. So, okay, I've linked the article. This is great stuff that's happened. Here's what I want to talk about. The article that I linked, it is an article describing the process, the methodology, how they went about it, why they went about it, and it lists the articles that or rather, it has the articles that they wrote. It's like a 47-minute read according to the web page. So it's a pretty long piece of literature here. It's 11,000 words. 39 pages, 11,000 words, 11,500 words. But it's all of the articles that they wrote as well. So, and here's the thing. The only reason that these guys came forward and wrote this article about writing the articles, their intent was to keep going, to keep doing this, to further study the extent of the damage that has been done to academia by progressivism and by the politicization of academia. But they actually got called out by the website Real Peer Review. Basically, one of their articles got published in a peer-reviewed magazine, a peer-reviewed journal, and Real Peer Review, which is a blog. It's a shiny new thing. But a third-party peer reviewer found it and said, "Whoa, this is bullshit. This is garbage." So basically, they got found out by somebody who's not a peer reviewer in the academic journals. They run their own separate peer review organ.
That guy got red pilled so hard that day because he let it slide so many times for serious articles, but on that day he's like, no more.
No.
I dedicated my life to this field.
Oh, you mean the Real Peer Reviewer guy?
Yeah.
No.
Called him out.
I think he's been out there trying to red pill people. Basically, I say that, but I haven't looked into him too much yet. I only became aware of him a little earlier today when I was reading these articles. I'm gonna go ahead and shut that out and pop back on the camera. So, in as much as the Sokal scam, the Sokal hoax, quite legitimately delegitimized all the ideas that are put forward by postmodernism and their just incredibly naked bigotry. In as much as that can be defended against by postmodernists with the argument that the journal was not peer reviewed at the time. this cinches that. This just solves that argument. There is no more argument to be made in that regard. That these were published, I mean, 7 of them, and there's every reason to suspect that if they had not been called out by a third party reviewer, basically a vigilante academician, then they would have continued and been quite successful in so doing.
They got a high percentage of them. 7 out of 20 attempts got published.
Yeah.
So that was a fairly successful suspicion and confirmation.
And to be clear, that is not what is not being said is that 13 out of 20 were rejected. It's that only 7 out of 20 have been published thus far.
That's a point.
Some of them were rejected, but not the majority of them yet. That was another part of it. Is some of them are still being reviewed and have neither been rejected or accepted yet. Well, of course, now those will be rejected. One would hope.
Yeah, don't count your chickens, man. We've seen worse.
But okay, so Dog Park.
Never underestimate the enemy's cognitive dissonance.
So here's the papers. Dog Park. Human reactions to rape culture and queer performativity in urban dog parks in Portland, Oregon. Status.
Hell
accepted and published. Let me just go back to the screen share. Status. Accepted and published.
This was the article. This was the article about people basically punishing their dogs when they tried to commit homosexual rape, but when they raped when it was, heterosexual dog rape, they were cool with it, right? And laughed, right?
Thesis that dog parks are rape condoning spaces and a place of rampant canine rape culture and systemic oppression against the oppressed dog.
More importantly, the line right above that started with the story was recognized for excellence.
Yes.
Astonishing.
And this is the article by the expression of concern raised on it following journalistic interest, leading us to have to conclude the project early. This is the article that got like third-party peer reviewed that made them basically shut down the hoax, right? And these are the reviewers. Now, let me be clear. Where it says reviewer 1, okay, the reviewers are all anonymous. But to be a reviewer means that you are either some sort of degree holding professional. You have in these cases, almost always it's a PhD, at least a master's, if not a PhD. These reviewers are almost exclusively practitioners in their field. They're clinical psychologists, they're things like that, or they're college professors. More often than not, they're two of those. They're some kind of professional, like Jordan Peterson, a college professor and clinical psychologist.
I'd love to see their last names.
Are supposed to be serious professionals, serious academic professionals, scientists. Thank you for the opportunity to review a really interesting paper. Make an important contribution to feminist animal geography. This
animals care about.
Stop! No! Stop the tape. I'm actually well versed in leftist insanity. You've actually got me there. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. Feminist animal geography. Let's move on.
Please.
Who are they to judge? Overcoming anthropometry and a framework for fat bodybuilding. Thesis, that it is only oppressive cultural norms which make society regard the building of muscle rather than fat admirable, and that bodybuilding and activism on behalf of the fat could be benefited by including fat bodies displayed in non-competitive ways.
Obviously, like, dude, I could be a personal trainer right now, $20 an hour.
I love the purpose. Purpose. To see if journals will accept arguments which are ludicrous and positively dangerous to health if they support cultural constructivist arguments around body positivity and fat phobia.
Did you guys write this?
Right. That does sound like some shit I would spit out there for these. But I want to bring your attention up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Accepted, published.
Beautiful.
The topic of this essay is certainly novel and addresses an issue relevant to a disenfranchised demographic. What?
I'll tell you what it is. Like, so the people who wrote these fake papers, right? Like you said in the beginning of this segment that they were lefties, but they're the leftists who actually still have a sense of humor. Like I guarantee they were probably inspired by this by reading The Onion for years. Like,
and not only that, but this is
Onion. It's Onion worthy. All of these.
This started back in 1996. What are the odds there's a handful of these folks or their peers in the walk away movement?
Yeah. Oh, you're probably right.
This was just over the last year. This was.
Oh, this one was.
Yeah. This is the current run of hoaxes.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood something.
Or rather, these guys are one big hoax.
Yeah.
He wrote 20 papers over the course of the last year and have been submitting them. And the only reason they stopped is because they got called out.
Okay.
But I want to bring your attention to something here. Reviewer 1, fat studies. Not some kind of health. No. Fat studies. Like African American studies.
They're all three like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, man.
And this sentence right here, this should terrify any intellectual person. The essay addresses bodybuilding as a stigmatizing activity toward the fat body and presents fat bodybuilding as a way to disrupt the cultural space of traditional bodybuilding. He's literally making the claim that if you take efforts to be healthy, that you are assaulting fat people. That healthy people, by virtue of being healthy, are causing harm to fat people.
No,
that is this reviewer's comment.
He's also saying that by forcing fat people into bodybuilding, that you are essentially destroying the traditional bodybuilding. He wants to destroy.
Sure.
Like everything else with the left.
Hang on. No. You're missing a very important piece of this article. The argument that they make in the article is that intentionally making yourself more obese is as legitimate a personal choice as choosing to be a bodybuilder.
And to delegitimize bodybuilding. That's the point. It seeks to destroy. It can't create its own space. The left has to take your space.
Yes.
They take your space by making their degeneracy or their failure either a norm or a virtue. Like, that's what they do. That's what this is. And you know what? I could lose 20 pounds too. Okay. So, I'm not making fun of fat people, but come
Chris, on. Scroll back up. There's some more mental dysfunction shown.
Dildos.
Read that line under the author writes, a fat body is a legitimately built body is one thing. Read the paragraph under it.
I mean, it was legitimately built by excessive calories. That is correct.
In at least two ways. First, the term frontier implies colonial expansion and hostile takeover. Oh my God! And the genocidal erasure of indigenous peoples.
Stop it.
Find another.
Oh my God! Stop it.
If If anything is telling, it's the fact that they think they have allies, and that's what they're adding to this fire with. That's interesting.
This is why I dropped out of college.
I don't blame you.
Homo hysteria.
What is that?
This is why I joined the army. Going through the back door. Wow.
Accepted and
Homo hysteric. We're not homophobic anymore. We're homo hysteric.
to see if journals will accept ludicrous arguments if they support unfalsifiable claims that common and harmless sexual choices made by straight men are actually homophobic, transphobic, and anti-feminist. Okay. For those of you out there who do not have a degree in philosophy, let's talk about what it means to make an unfalsifiable claim. Mario?
Isn't that when you present someone a negative and you force them to through a positive to try to validate themselves, or is it something like that where it's not possible?
Okay. If I were to say that you raped me sometime in the past, say 1982,
yeah,
and I presented you with no evidence to support that claim,
and
but I've made the claim, then having no evidence to support my claim while demanding that you defend your necessary counterclaim, obviously that you did not rape me in 1982, which is moderately possible. We were both alive in 1982.
I was 2.
We might have both been walking, maybe, but you get my point.
Yeah.
That no evidence can be produced which can prove a negative case.
So like, if it is impossible, I got you. It's
always impossible.
God exists. God doesn't exist. Prove me wrong. You can't.
Right. It is always impossible to prove the truth of a negative statement unless one can prove the truth of a counterfactual positive statement.
Okay. Yeah.
If one makes the claim that Colonel Mustard killed Mrs. Plum in the armory with the candlestick, and then one can show clear at noon, and then one can clearly show Colonel Mustard in the library at noon, and the candlestick in the foyer at noon, then clearly, since it is positively proved, then the counterfact overweights that negative fact. But absent the proof of the counterclaim that it is impossible, it is counterfactually impossible for the positive claim to be true, then the negative claim is proved. But only can a negative claim be proved if a positive counterclaim can be proved to negate it. Mm-hmm. So if you say you murdered Joe, and I can't say I was in Tahiti, then your case, all you have to do is prove that I was near Joe at the time. That's the problem with an unfalsifiable claim. It is unfalsifiable. Accepted and published. This article is an incredibly rich and exciting contribution to the study of sexuality and culture, and particularly the intersection between masculinity and anality. This contribution, to be certain, is important.
Anality?
Yep. Wow. It is an absolute. It is an absolute tragedy of justice that these reviewers are anonymous.
Oh, I'd love to see the last names. Echo.
Okay, we have run right up to 2100. I would like to keep going for a little bit, and just I want to go through all of these articles real quick. Well, I mean, I want to go through all of these articles, but I don't want to run way over. So let's just keep plugging for a minute. I just want to.
But Larry, if I get plugged in the ass, I'll be a better person, is what they're saying.
That is literally the claim. No. You've misunderstood. That it is suspicious that men rarely anally self-penetrate.
I read that too.
What the claim they're making is that you will be a better person if you plug yourself in the ass.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Decreases transphobia, it increases feminist values. Interesting.
Getting fucked?
Evidently.
Sorry, moving on. Okay. Hooters.
See, we've managed to avoid the fuck word all night.
No, we hadn't. I said it wants to.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. I kept track.
An ethnography of restaurant masculinity.
That's gorgeous. Accepted. Published.
Every time I gorge myself on another plate of unlimited wings on Tuesday, it's another sexual conquest for me, I tell you.
It's a celebration of your nostalgic patriarchal dominance. Oh.
So much white meat.
Oh, God. Reviewers and I were positive about many aspects of the manuscript, and we believe that it could make an important contribution to the field. That's from the editor
of Sexuals. Yeah.
I need to subscribe. I have to know.
Hoax on Hoaxes 2. When the joke is on you, a feminist perspective on how positionality influences satire.
And it went right by them because it was
that academic hoaxes or other forms of satirical or ironic critique of social justice scholarship are unethical, characterized by ignorance and rooted in a desire to preserve privilege. To see if journals will accept an argument that shuts down critiques of social justice scholarship as a lack of engagement and understanding, even if one engages fully and knowledgeably with the ideas to the extent of having a Jesus that's a long purpose statement.
Yeah.
Paper on them published in a leading academic journal. This paper is also to anticipate and show understanding of the feminist epistemological arguments against our project and demonstrate their high estimation in the field by having them accepted in the leading academic journal of feminist philosophy. That is, to criticize our work that way, they have to cite us.
That just said, we're fucking with you and we dare you to put this out there.
This is the study of why you cannot disagree with me.
Wow.
It's very promising. From Hypatia. I've never heard of these publications. Are these like in the fifth row in the far left corner at like Barnes and Nobles? Like, where does one find these?
No. One finds publications like these by contacting them and subscribing to them. They're expensive subscriptions.
Oh, they've got to be like $15 an issue or something.
And they're available to. They're basically all made available to students through their university libraries.
Yeah, this isn't something you'd want available in the local supermarket. Like the game would get flipped real quick if average people read this shit.
Let me help you understand something, a very important point about this. We're talking about peer-reviewed academic journals. These are basically by way of non-promotion. They don't advertise themselves generally. the way they work is these are the trade magazines. These are the trade papers for the professors in the fields.
Right.
And they are the only acceptable research material sources for papers written in the fields.
It's their private accredited circle jerk. Yeah.
Yes. It's a magic little echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent and very timely article, especially nice connection with pedagogy and activism.
Wow.
Wow. Meetings and the Meaning of Sisterhood, a poetic portrayal of lived feminist spirituality. Oh, I want you to notice also this.
Read that byline.
This is
what is pure initiate fictional? I don't
fictional. They said it right there.
Yeah, I want to point out this is not the name of one of the people who perpetrated the hoax. They got these articles published in these peer-reviewed journals using fake names.
They're pseudonyms, okay.
Wow.
Fucking straight 100%. Bam. All in.
And this, I freaking love the
this paper got a 100%.
A rambling poetic monologue of a bitter divorced feminist, much of which was produced by a teenage angst poetry generator before being edited into something slightly more realistic, which is then interspersed with self-indulgent autoethnographical and reflections on female sexuality and spirituality, written entirely in slightly under 6 hours.
That's probably the most accurate one so far.
I like that word. Autoethnographical. It's basically myself as a white man.
How you see yourself, yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
You know what? Saved. I'm taking that one. I'm going to go read this article.
Our struggle is my struggle. Solidarity feminism as an intersectional reply to neoliberal and choice feminism. Now, before I scroll down further, I know what this one is.
I already heard about this one too.
It's going to break you. If you haven't already heard about this, as we read the thesis and the plan, it's going to break your heart. It's hilarious.
I won't spoil it. I won't spoil it. Go ahead.
The feminism which foregrounds individual choice and responsibility and female agency and strength can be countered by a feminism which unifies in solidarity around the victimhood of the most marginalized women in society. That's the thesis. This was accepted. This one was not published because they pulled the plug on the hoax, but it was up to be published.
Oh, so close. Right. So close.
Ready? To see if we could find theory to make anything grievance related, in this case, part of Chapter 12 of Volume 1 of Mein Kampf, with fashionable buzzwords switched in, acceptable to journals if we mixed and matched fashionable arguments. They literally had a feminist, peer-reviewed academic journal publish a passage from Mein Kampf as a legitimate academic, as if it were a legitimate academic claim in feminism.
Mein Kampf was a novel of victimization. That was the main point behind it. So yeah, it fits perfectly.
Yeah. Adolf Hitler, the original neo-Marxist.
He disagreed, but that's okay.
Say again?
He would disagree, but that's okay. He argued that his socialism had nothing to do with Marxist socialism, but that's a totally different topic.
No, because socialism.
Well, you can argue that all day. I mean, I can argue all day that the sun is purple, and I can make that argument. That doesn't make me correct.
Yeah, right on.
This is an interesting paper seeking to further the aims of inclusive feminism by attending to the issue of allyship and solidarity.
I like this because it kills all ideas of individuality.
Welcome to the modern left.
Yeah.
As I read your manuscript, I found the framing and treatment of both neoliberal and choice feminisms well-grounded.
Neoliberal and I don't even know what this means. Okay, they speak their own language.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Really no, they generate their own language as they speak. They don't even understand what they're saying to one another.
I am very sympathetic to the core arguments of the paper, such as the need for solidarity and the problematic nature of neoliberal feminism. So what I'm doing right now is problematic, and wow.
What is neoliberal feminism?
That's like somebody practicing modern feminism now wanting to go back to like second phase stuff because they don't like the way this is going now.
That's what they mean. Right. Yeah, they're the ones who are saying that third wave feminism went too far and we need to go back to more of a classical structure, which means that they're now oppressors. Perfect. Fucking priceless.
They've slid down the stack. Porn.
Oh, good God.
Agency as an elephant test for feminist porn. Impacts on male explicit and implicit associations about women in society by immersive pornography consumption.
I'm sorry, I have to read that title again. What is it? What is an elephant? What is an elephant test?
I actually don't know. That actually gets past me. Refers to the ability to recognize something while being unable to describe it.
Oh,
it may be
the thing about
what? I got you. Blind men and an elephant.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got you. Okay, I got you. There were certain Indians that couldn't see boats because they didn't know they existed.
Yeah, they couldn't describe. I heard like descriptions of Mesoamericans saying that they were like, they had no word for it. They had no concept. But anyway, yeah, revise and resubmit. Yeah, this could be pretty MG-toe.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and read that thesis, Mario?
That feminist porn is good for improving explicit and implicit attitudes about women in society, while other porn is bad for this. The paper seeks to upset the female-friendly, female-degrading dichotomy in favor of feminist, non-feminist, as read according to perceptions of scene authenticity and female performer agency. Wow, let me try to break this down. I think they're talking about they want to make porn where women are enjoying it, but they're not, apparently. I don't, yeah.
The beauty of the thesis is it is the same kind of nonsensical pseudo-academic language that we expect from the pseudo-academics that are the peer reviewers for these papers. The original hypotheses for this paper were two, one of which survived an initial request to rewrite the paper. The first, which survives, is that taking the Harvard Implicit Association test on gender and science immediately before and after 2-hour blocks of immersive pornography consumption.
Did you see the numbers? In all, it posited that 4 men watched 2,328 hours of hardcore pornography over the course of a year.
And took the same number of implicit association tests. Oh, the second, in addition to any commentary made by the thesis it forwards, is that it is acceptable to override ambiguous statistical results with ideology interpreted qualitative results. but because the journal's editor seemed not to understand the statistics, the second draft largely abandoned this hypothesis in favor of a more feminism good position. So it is literally the case that
four legs good, two legs bad.
the claim that they're making here, is quite literally that because the lefty has trouble with math, they threw the math away and just said, "You're smart."
Yeah.
Amazing.
As such, the paper under review still forwards the IAT hypothesis and attempts to position extremely female degrading scenarios as being pro-women, and they can be construed as feminist. I found this article to be weird, fascinating, fun, and provocative. I would very much like to see it published in some form. It's trying to do something genuinely new, and the fact that it doesn't get it exactly right first time is to be expected given its experimental status. The authors should be supported in this project.
From the publication point, we know what he's really saying is, send me your source material.
Ooh, I think I'm done with that one. Yes! Here we go. I have personal experience with this shit. An intersectional feminist approach to pedagogy.
Fact. Fictional.
Fact. Are both of you tracking on what the progressive stack is?
I think, doesn't it mean that like if based on your intrinsic characteristics like your race and gender and where you're from, like you are more of a victim than someone else? For example, like black woman is more of a victim than white woman is more of a victim than gay white man is more of a victim than, etc. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, imagine that your victim badges, your individual victim badges, actually increase your individual worth.
Yeah.
And so you should be given more attention in academia. Professors who subscribe to the idea of the progressive stack, the way it works is you start with white, straight.
Yep.
I hate this word, but it's relevant in this context. You start with white, straight, cisgendered, conservative, male. That's the bedrock. That's the dead. Oh, and Christian. That's the bottom plane. That's the floor. And everybody else gets stacked on top of you. So anybody who has any attribute that is other than the 6 or 7 that I just mentioned goes before you. So let's say you're in a classroom and you raise your hand to answer a question. The professor will call on the person who is the least like a straight white cis blah 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 male. That person will be called on first.
Yeah. This is how you create a Fourth Reich. Like this is how you turn people into Nazis.
And by the by, for that reason, in every class that I have ever taken in college, I do not raise my hand to answer questions. I simply begin speaking.
Nice.
I didn't do that. I didn't do that in every class in my first semester to begin with. And then I understood what was happening. And I just, nope, I'll just start speaking. And here we go. This is the thing that I just described. Thesis that educators should discriminate by identity and calculate their students' status in terms of privilege, favor the least privileged with more time, attention, and positive feedback, and penalize the most privileged by declining to hear their contributions, deriding their input, intentionally speaking over them, and making them sit on the floor in chains, framed as educational opportunities we term experiential reparations.
Wow.
That's where they went. That's where they went too far. That's if they had just removed the making them sit on the floor in chains, this would have been like immediate accepted.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. If they had just stopped. If they had
So
just
they were getting
right here.
They were getting too good at this. They were getting too good at it. They decided to push
If
up
they had
the ante
just
a little
stopped,
bit.
if they had just put a period instead of a comma right there, it would have gone straight through. I was in an educator's class, and they were talking about a poet who was gay, and oh damn, gay black poet, Harlem Renaissance. Actually, spent most of his time in France. Damn, I forget his name now. But anyway,
He was
wrote
pretty high he was high on the stack, wasn't he?
Well, I mean, we're talking about Harlem Renaissance, so I mean, this is before postmodernism was a process in academia, or at least it was in its earliest inceptions. But anyway, the point was that the writer, he was gay. He had a male life partner, right? But the poetry he wrote was about his experiences as a black man, and he wrote it in the vernacular of old South blacks, kind of like reading Gone with the Wind or Brer Rabbit, right? And it was the fact of his sexuality was utterly irrelevant to the type of poetry he wrote, and I brought that up. They were going on about how his work just didn't get the attention it deserved because Americans hate gay people. And I said, okay, for starters, and damn, I can't believe the name escapes me right now, but I said, okay, for starters, no, he's one of the most celebrated, not black poets, not American poets. This man is one of the most celebrated poets in modernity, period. He is one of the greats. His sexuality is almost entirely separate and excluded from the poetry he wrote. Now, there is a fine argument to be made that he may have made the choice not to write about his sexuality because of the criticism and of the persecution of it at the time. And that's a fine argument. But the argument that's being made is that he's undervalued today because of his sexuality. And that's absolutely ludicrous. He's celebrated for the work that he did. And the work that he did had nothing to do with his being a homosexual. And the professor just looked at me and said, well, that's a very heteronormative view. You just don't understand because you just don't understand because you have these heteronormative worldview goggles on.
Holy shit, dude.
Let me stop you for just a second there. This idea of heteronormativity.
It's called biology.
Thank you. Heterosexuality is normal. It is the default setting. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with homosexuality. Frankly, I don't care. But the idea that being heterosexual and having opinions which are rooted in your biological sex are illegitimized by the nature of them is unintelligible. And it's intellectually
And
disingenuous.
Oscar Wilde was a celebrated poet and a blatant queer, and he got away with it in Victorian England. Yeah, poetry is understood that way.
Oh, I can't wait to read the purpose statement here. To see if journals will accept arguments which advocate rating students by their identity, privileging the most marginalized and discriminating against the most privileged to the extent of having them sit on the floor in chains and have their contributions discredited. This was accepted. No requirement for revision took issue with that. This is a solid essay that, with revision, will make a strong contribution to the growing literature on addressing epistemic injustice in the classroom. Epistemic injustice? Mario, I am no longer becoming concerned that these people don't understand, that these people are, oh God. No, I'm starting to lose my concern that these people are maliciously dangerous, and starting to become more concerned that they don't understand they don't know what words are. Epistemic injustice.
Yeah.
That
epistemic means something deriving from the very origin or center point.
Epistemology. Epistemology is the theory or study of knowledge. It's the philosophy of how we know things.
Right. The very center origin point. Yeah. I'm just looking at the Greek.
Yeah. Epicenter, epistemic, yes. And that's why it's called epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, the theory and philosophy of knowledge.
Basically, they're saying that the very origin of knowledge is possibly unjust.
Yes.
It's
but
Larry, you know, all of this
learning is oppressive.
Yeah, this all ties back to the Frankfurt School. Everything here.
Oh yeah.
Knowledge is privilege, is it?
It's the final form of the Frankfurt School. You know, the Herbert Marcuse, the friggin' Trotskyites that escaped Nazi Germany only to come over here and just spread their poison with the full, you know, academic, you know, credentialization of our universities. This stuff's been going on since the 1950s. It's finally reached its event horizon, and I hope it collapses at some point.
Oh shit.
It has to, or we all go with it.
Mario, I got to stop you. Because I just noticed something.
What?
Epistemic injustice.
Not the only place it says it.
Wow.
So epistemic injustice was mentioned by two separate reviewers, reviewer 1 and reviewer 2, which means that it's not an original thought from either of them, which means somebody else coined it.
Yeah.
Which means it's part of the action. Oh my God, it is the third. You type in, if you Google epistemic injustice is the third suggested result.
The buzzword.
Was introduced to the literature in the monograph of that name, Epistemic Injustice, Power and the Ethics of Knowing. 2007.
Okay, so we learned something new. I didn't even know that was a point in the argument. I hadn't heard that term before tonight.
Oh, and it's born through feminist philosophy.
I'm so woke right now. It's not even funny.
Chris, you might want to move along if we're going to get through more of these. It's already 9:30.
I gotta get going, guys.
Okay, one more, Mario, and then I'll call it a night. because feminist AI,
AI.
Super Frankenstein and the masculine imaginary, feminist epistemology, and super intelligent artificial intelligence safety research.
They do
Ready?
love that word. They love episteme.
That AI isn't okay. Hang on a minute. I'm gonna just get all that on one page. That AI is inherently dangerous because it is being programmed with masculinist, imperialistic, rationalist
Jesus. It's being taught math, people. It's what it does.
Math bad. Math bad. We're being oppressed by math.
You're absolutely right. Skynet doesn't care about your feelings.
Great white men know this and fear that they will be subordinated as they have subordinated women and minorities. Therefore, AI needs to be programmed with plural and irrationalist knowledges and given control over humanity.
How do you program a rationalist? We need what's the actor from Jurassic Park? What's his name?
Reprogramming personality into your machine.
Chaos theory. Like we need.
Oh, I love that purpose. I love
seriously how
plural and irrationalist knowledges.
How do you program irrational? You can't
control over humanity. I'm dying here, guys. The sea turtles were published dense and incoherent.
I'm sorry.
Psychoanalytic and postmodern theory that problematizes whiteness, maleness, science, and reason as oppressive. And reason, science, and reason as oppressive. Wait. Okay, revise and resubmit. Minor revision to lengthen style.
Let's go to the comments page. Let's go to the style.
Oh wow! This is the only comment they were giving. Your article has now been peer reviewed by 2 experts. Their comments are attached at the bottom of this letter. As you can see, the reviewers felt that this was a strong piece, but suggested some minor revisions. We invite you to revise and resubmit your manuscript responding to the reviewers' comments and in accordance with the attached style guide. Please reduce word length and bring in line with journal requirements.
Holy.
So literally the only complaint was it was too long.
It's too long and we need you to meet AMA standards. Otherwise, oh yeah. 10 out of 10.
Oh my God.
You sure you don't want to move forward into feminist astronomy? And
to be fair, like reason is oppressive because it really doesn't care how I feel, and it does upset me sometimes.
That's the first one outright rejected right there. What was the thesis?
White Mein Kampf,
which is kind of redundant.
Struggle to dismantle mein whiteness.
Whiteness from within whiteness.
Wow. In this case, selected sections of Mein Kampf in which Hitler criticizes Jews, replacing Jews with white people and or whiteness.
Oh, man. They should have just avoided using... They shouldn't have said it was Mein Kampf. They should have just done it.
Wait. In problematizing her own whiteness, the author seeks to address a void within critical whiteness scholarship.
Wow.
Given the most reflexive commentary on whiteness is relegated to, oh my God, this person completely ignored the fact that what they were reading is just straight up Mein Kampf.
What this woman, she's saying Mein Kampf didn't go far enough.
Go to the next paragraph. Focuses on extremely important subject matter with a significant and thoughtful methodology. Wow.
Wow. Literature related to the mechanisms that reinforce white adherence to white supremacist perspectives and to the process by which individuals can come into deeper levels of social and racial consciousness. This person should be found out and questioned.
I was gonna say, it was
No,
friggin'
this person,
my
this person should be. This person needs to be put to the question.
I mean,
that leads to a very dark place.
This reviewer is actively advocating for an anti-white Holocaust in America.
Yeah.
Yes.
Queering Plato.
And
Plato's allegory of the cave is a queer, theoretic, emancipatory text on sexuality and gender. Oh, and this is by Carol Miller. She wrote one of those earlier papers. Cough, cough. Wink, wink.
Desk rejected after several months and retired. Okay. So this one just never got reviewed. Plato's allegory of the cave is best read as a queer theoretic text that positions overcoming binaries of sexuality and gender as a kind of enlightened state, and thus accepting those binaries as a kind of blindness.
To see if it would be possible to foist a ridiculous and ideological reading of Plato's allegory of the cave upon gender and sexuality studies if it sufficiently flattered the notion that overcoming binaries constitutes a kind of personal and societal enlightenment.
Okay, so we've gone a half hour over our usual time. I'm going to go ahead and call it right there. But I think we've made a pretty clear point here. And this is something that both of our live viewers, not our highest call, guys, or not our highest draw.
Well, I think one thing, remember, 7 of those things did get published out of the 20, and that was up until the point where it was found out, and then they started getting the ignored and rejected letters. But the other side of that being, any argument made which flatters the position of the reviewer tends to be accepted and run with.
I'm gonna go examine my intersectional anality or something.
I don't want to see video of that later.
I'm broken right now. I'm done.
Wow. Hang on. I just have to read one more title to you. ASSZE is the title. The full title, Masculinity and the Others Within. A schizoethnographic approach to autoethnography.
Oh, Rachel Dolezal. That's perfect.
Where my brain went to. Wow.
Rachel Dolezal. Yeah. I got that.
Oh my.
No clear thesis beyond that schizoethnography, in which one considers the varying lines of thought in one's mind to be different selves with different insights, a rambling autoethnography incorporating many selves, which interrogates the author's masculinity as problematic. Purpose: to see if journals will publish utter nonsense if it comes in the form of autoethnography and reflects fashionable negativity about masculinity.
Fashionable negativity. Like that is.
Man, I wish they'd have been able to keep writing. These are just get better as we go.
Yeah, these guys should just go in the business of writing this shit and publishing it for Chuck. I would basically just be the Onion of academia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a market for that.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's only there's only one more article after that. So, oh no, there's a conclusion.
They actually should be publishing this stuff like in a satire format, you know, for entertainment. Like people would buy this.
Yeah.
Like
get sponsored, send it as a mailing list thing. Yeah, you could do that.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, we've gone way over. I think we've made the point that postmodernism is madness, and that the adherents of postmodernism are not legitimate academics. They're politically motivated activists and, quite frankly, madmen. They're dangerous, and they have utterly invaded academia. They are murdering the minds of your children. They are stealing your money away. And they are causing nigh irreparable harm to the posterity of the entire human race. I don't think I've overstated that case.
Or at least our academic institutions. The humanities are dead. Let's face it. And they've been dead since the late 90s. It wasn't any better when I first went to college in 99. It was exactly like this.
Well, Cade just walked in as we were about to sign off. So
What are we doing over here?
we were just signing off.
Oh,
Hey, it's a Cade.
hey,
Hey, it's
me.
Cade.
Where's Waldo?
He's here.
Ah,
Yeah.
yes.
Stripes and all.
I found
Hey,
it.
get into the shot.
Where's the camera? This is the camera?
That's the camera.
Hello, all.
Okay. Well,
This is a long show tonight.
that's been an excellent show tonight. It
It
was
was much fun.
honestly, you're gonna have to watch this one. It was awesome.
I will do that.
You should have been on the show tonight. But it's been a good show. It's been a great week. Ladies and gentlemen, until next week, remember, build a man a fire, you'll keep him warm for the evening. But if you set a man on fire, he'll be warm for the rest of his life. Good night.